Hello, I'm Louise Devonish. I'm a decorative arts consultant for FirstDibs.com, and I'm here today with Henry Neville, president of MALLETT Inc. Hi, Henry.
Hi there, Louise.
Well, what have we here?
Well, we're here to talk about neoclassicism, principally, but I thought we'd start today with this table. This table is Southern Italian, it's probably Neapolitan, and what you see here is the strength of curves, the depth of very, very rich detailing. Every single surface here has a pattern, and every single surface here has movement, right to the inside of the legs, right down to the toes. When you get to neoclassicism, as you very well know, you get a much greater restraint, you get a much greater refinement, you get a more controlled use of decorative language. You don't get this exuberance that you have on this table, nor do you usually get such weight and then the combination with such lightness. For instance, this pair of torchères here and here. These are designed by Robert Adam for one of his famous Scottish houses, Haddo House. Here you see a much straighter line, a much more restrained use of ornament, classical ornament absolutely exclusively. Very little of the indulgent linear motion that the natural elements and misquoting of ornament has in this table. The control here is what exemplifies neoclassicism. Classical urn, classical ram's heads, classical ram's feet, lion's paw bases. Very, very restrained use of detailing, but still nonetheless a highly effective stand and torchère fit for its purpose.
Henry, I love this wood. What kind of wood is it?
This is a West Indian satinwood. What's lovely about this early satinwood from the Caribbean is it fades to a wonderful golden colour. What's also fascinating about this piece of furniture, by comparison perhaps to the pieces downstairs, is that this, as many pieces of 18th century and historically antique furniture, shows you how people used to live in days past.
Yes.
This ratchets up.
Ooh.
It has a removable slide here on which you can support a book to read.
Wonderful.
Actually, what it was meant for is something a little bit more elaborate even than that. Inside this drawer, beautifully fitted with mahogany, is the original artist's palette.
Oh my goodness.
In which you'd have had all your watercolours. So here, you'd have had a small, ladies probably, amateur painting table on which you'd have had your colours in here, your painting up here, and your lights, because of course there were no electric lights in the 18th century, your candles here, so that you could, thank you Louise, paint.
You know what I love are the little escutcheons. What are they made of?
Here and here, this is all ivory,
Beautiful.
and then this is the original gilded brass. But again, you can see the slight combination that we've been talking about of different quotations within the period of neoclassicism in the late 18th century, with the turned legs and this slightly elaborate collar and
Yes.
foot down to the toe.
So we're using that column.
We're using a column
idea,
again,
yes.
but we're articulating it with a slightly different language. And again, behind you, this table is something that is very similar, roughly the same period. We're talking here 1790s to 1800s.
They're spectacular, aren't they?
Again, great timber.
Yeah.
Here you have a bur elm as the main timber, and then satinwood and rosewood as the residual timbers.
Ooh.
But here, inlaid with this gilded brass and this brass edging, just to give it that little bit more bling
Yes.
for the 18th century. I'm not too sure that word is ever
that's
used in the 18th century, but that's what it was. Pizzazz, have what you will.
I love these little acorns.
Yes.
And the spade feet.
Always quoting again when you became more confident, a national language, not a Roman language. You saw downstairs the goat's heads, the very classical.
Yes.
Here they are taking the acorn as a sign of Britain, and they're putting that on their neoclassical table and trying to make Britain a greater classical country by doing so.
Very interesting, like a political statement.
Yes, very much a political statement.
Yes. These are wonderful chairs. I love them. First of all, they're very comfortable, but also sort of I get that kind of Frank Lloyd Wright feeling where he wants to frame the person so that each person around the table sort of is a portrait.
You're feeling framed, are you?
Oh dear, oh dear.
I like these chairs.
Yes.
I do think they're a good design. They're by a man called Romeo Rega, who actually worked with Willy Rizzo, whose pieces we looked at downstairs.
Oh, right.
These are about 1970.
Yes.
And they are comfortable because they have a degree of give in the back, so you can rock in them.
Yes.
Which means that actually when you're getting bored of somebody's story at a dinner party, don't rock, Louise. You can rock the chairs and can relax.
Got it, got it.
And what we're doing here again, I think, now is to show a little bit more how neoclassical proportions and restraint gets interpreted in the 20th century.
Exactly.
So you're sitting in a set of chairs that are 1970. You're looking at a pair of decanters that are 1900.
Wonderful.
And these decanters very much Art Nouveau. These are actually Viennese.
They are exquisite.
With silver tops. But again, you can see this restraint of ornament, but the detailing with the faceting, exactly what we were looking at with the same proportions, very nearly, as the Adam Tour chairs downstairs.
What would you put in these?
Me?
Yes.
Red wine.
Red wine.
I don't know what you'd put in them, but I put red wine in them. Really nice Burgundy in these, a Pinot Noir, would of course show the colour so well.
Yes.
What's important nowadays is probably not to have those very densely, highly cut carafes and decanters, because you can never see the colour of the wine. If you've got good wine, you used to enjoy the colour.
Exquisite, and I just love the table that you
Well,
put
the
this
table
with.
is by Maison Janssen. Now, Janssen were really the great makers for mostly the European aristocracy and wealth throughout the 20th century. I think the house actually closed for business in the late 70s, early 80s. Early 80s. This is called the Table Royale. They made a number of these tables just with black, but very, very few with this wonderful gilded foliate lacquer decoration in the middle.
Beautiful, yes.
And in some ways, this brings us back to what we've been discussing before, how a very simple linear proportion works extremely well throughout any age and era, but always you can have decoration within it that is differently quoted in different ages. So you get the oak leaf on the Sheraton table downstairs, you get the goat's head on the Adam Tour chairs, and here you get these wonderful entwined gilded leaves as a piece of fantasy on the middle of a 1970 dining table.
Wondrous. I love the legs too. I wonder if
They all collapse, which is one of their design features and something you will see on a number of Janssen tables. This particular leg design is very, very particular and patented by them.
versatile.
Very versatile.
Yes, because you can have a small pied-à-terre.
Or a larger dining.
Exactly, and just pull it out. And of course, the very classical DN.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely, wonderful.
What you have here is you have the Medici and Borghese vases in classical, period vases. One is now in the Uffizi, the Medici vase, the other Borghese vase is, I think, now in the Louvre in Paris. Great big stone vases. But they inspired
Yes.
these objects a revival in classical interest, and were cast probably more and modelled probably more than any other single classical object.
Isn't that interesting?
Now, we've been talking about classical furniture,
Yes.
and we've been looking at neoclassical furniture and how the aesthetics of neoclassicism have continued throughout centuries in different guises.
Right.
These objects are really the grand tour, the tourist trinkets, the very finest that you could possibly buy when you were traveling in Italy. This particular bronze here is cast by an Italian called Boschetti, and it would have been something that a very wealthy man would have brought back to his London house or his country estate to say that he was a sophisticated and knowledgeable man about town. Look at the depth here of the carving,
Oh, it's marvelous.
the quality of the bronze,
Yes.
and the modelling. What was interesting is that traditionally the two vases are not as similar in their original classical existence as they were when they were reproduced in the neoclassical era as a pair. So you get a slightly different edging and finishing to them so that you could
Wonderful.
always have the pair of vases on your dining table, sideboard, mantelpiece.
Wonderful. And how about these little gems over here?
These here are 1780s. We're still looking at exactly this period, similar to the Adam Torshare for Addo House downstairs. But these are French. These are Louis XVI. And you can see again this quotation and reuse of the goat's foot that you had in the Torshares, the single central column stem, the same kind of proportion. And here there is a serpent spiraling round the column in order to give it added decoration. And these little kind of cassolettes here would have been used as incense, or probably much more likely candles, to sit on your side table at night.
Charming. So we'd like to thank you for joining us today and this wonderful tour of classicism through the ages, and we hope to see you again on First Dibs for another session next time, maybe for the Rococo period. Thank you, Henry, for having us.
Thank you, Louise, very much indeed. It's been a huge pleasure. Greatly enjoyed it.